Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of The Other Side of Things. This will be Part 9, Chapter 9, entitled Thunderstrike. The brunette girl was fiddling with her macchiato as her eyes nervously flickered around the busy cafe, the bell at the entrance drowned out by the din of conversation around. Her large eyes widened as the boy sat down in front of her, gloved hands coming up to remove his black surgical mask and revealing a cold smirk. Uraraka Ochako, I assume. The girl opened her mouth to reply, but was interrupted by the waitress, and the suave smirk and calculating eyes of the boy melted into a sunshine smile and friendly green eyes. Yes, 1 mocha, please. That would be great. The waitress returned his smile with friendly professionalism, the boy's face morphing back into business mode immediately. Nice to meet you. You can call me Sithis while we conduct business. Right. She was completely out of her depth, and suspected the villain had arranged things the way he did to take advantage of this. When she had agreed to this meeting, she had expected dark back alleys and envelopes of laundered money, not a cafe across the police station during lunch rush. First things first, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. I believe congratulations are in order, Uraraka. It's not every day someone with a non-combat quirk makes it into UA's hero course, especially not with your circumstances. The villain once again morphed into sunshine and rainbows when he received his drink, the freckles on his pale skin giving the illusion of innocence. After a sip from his drink, he smirks. I'm sorry you didn't receive the scholarship. Can we just skip all this? The glint in the boy's eyes told her he was waiting for her to snap, and she berated herself. Some hero she'd make. He straightened in his seat, but to anyone else he'd just look like he was excited to tell a friend something. Of course, Uraraka. I'm sorry, I have the tendency to ramble. He reaches into the pocket of his hoodie, retrieving a burner phone. This has a single number saved on it. Once you have information on a convenient situation to get All Might, call, let it ring thrice. You will receive a message on where to meet. She eyes the phone wearily. That's all? That's all. You guys are going to pay my first year at UA? Yes. She bites her bottom lip, quickly snatching the phone and putting it in her bag before she can change her mind. Hesitating, brown eyes meet green again. What's your plan with All Might? The boy raises an eyebrow and tilts his head. At first glance he might look confused, but the girl can't help but feel like prey. Nothing that concerns you, Uraraka. We simply want a single piece of information and you're set. That's the deal. But hard eyes tell her to quiet down as the people 2 tables over look in their direction. I won't do anything if you're trying to kill him. The boy looks at her for a long moment. What makes you think I'd tell you? What makes you think I'd tell the truth? Brown eyes flicker to the table, then back to his. If I can't trust you to tell me the truth, I can't trust you to pay me. Her eyes suddenly became hard, determined. If I don't believe you, I'll go to the police. When he raises his eyebrow this time, his confusion appears genuine. Oh, you have spunk. I like that. The boy reaches for his wallet, fiddling with its contents. Don't worry your little head, Uraraka. All Might won't die. He pauses once, seeming to change his mind. Well, in the end it's up to him, I suppose. Does that answer your question? It was a rhetorical question, she knows, as he puts far too much money on the table and quickly downs the rest of his mocha. When had he even had the time to drink it during their conversation? In a fluid motion, he puts his mask back in its place and his wallet back in his hoodie pocket. I'm looking forward to your call, Uraraka. And then he was gone, and the girl wondered what she'd gotten herself into. What do you mean you won't tell us who the traitor is? The lack of cold in his chest told Izuku that Aizawa had his quirk directed at him. His feet were against the edge of the desk, kicking back his chair on the hind legs, arms hanging over the back of it as he stared at the ceiling. What it says on the tin, Eraser. I ain't telling you shit. And why is that, brat? Izuku raised his gaze to look at the angry teacher, black hair floating around him like a demonic halo. The deal was information on the League. The traitor, he made air quotes around the word, is, an independent contractor. Really, he was giving them enough hints to figure it out on their own, he thought. Why, you little... Aizawa-kun, that is quite enough, Nezu cut in. Now, Midoriya-kun, I think you should be a little more serious about the matter. Why are you really not telling us? Izuku looked at the principal with a thoughtful expression, then let the chair thump soundly back to the floor. The traitor, as you call them, only sold the leak information once, about the best time to attack All Might. We paid their first year of tuition for their troubles. And now they're going to sell the location of the training camp. What's your point? My class almost died. I almost died at the USJ. Oh, get off it, Eraser. I wouldn't have hurt you worse than I did, and you know it. Do I? There was silence as Izuku met Aizawa's bloodshot gaze. Do I really? I thought I did, but then you turn around and make me doubt myself, kid. I arranged the whole goddamn USJ attack with the least amount of injuries possible without raising suspicions and pulled my punches. That whole thing could have ended with all of you dead and nothing left to bury, Eraser. Izuku stands up, his eyes hard as he fixes his gaze on Aizawa. I won't blow my cover because you don't like dealing with variables, hero. Telling you who the traitor is won't give you anything worthwhile. Maintaining my cover and letting the traitor be will. Then what do you suggest? Nezu piped up, sipping from his tea. I don't know, he shrugged. It's none of my business. I'm not in the habit of selling out desperate people. That's rich coming from a double agent, isn't it? A double agent who won't remain one if you make me blow my cover. Izuku steps around the conference table, eyes hard as he glowers at Aizawa. This shtick is the only insurance I have with the police and the commission. I'm not putting my life in your hands without a guarantee that I'll walk out of it without a ride straight to Tartarus. His shoulders fall as he averts his gaze, and Aizawa isn't sure if it's an act or genuine. He is good at reading people, but the teenager had a level of control over his features and voice that was almost eerie. He says things that should register as lies, Eraserhead. Tsukauchi's voice rings in his ears. White lies, at least, but nothing he says rings as anything but true, and it's wrong. This kid is either stupidly honest, a psychopath, or a mixture of both, and it's scary. I've been nothing but cooperative and honest, Eraser, the kid says, and the detective's words ring inside his head again, over and over like a broken record. The kid says truths that are lies, Eraser. I don't know how, but he must be. I have been providing all the research I've done under All for One, have provided information on the Yakuza and on Stain and countless other villains that have been giving you heroes a slip for years. I've helped train your brats. I've saved their lives when I have no reason to. I've helped with your lesson plans and grading, and quite frankly, I'm sick of being treated like a disposable pawn yet again. No one spends 5 years with the boogeyman and comes out this side of the river, Eraser. So either guarantee my freedom once and for all, or be content with what I give you. No one has ever betrayed the boogeyman and lived to tell the tale, Eraserhead. No one has ever spent more than a month at the boogeyman's mercy and tried to betray him. Whatever he did to the kid is irreversible, and we'd be fools to trust him. Izuku's hands go to his neck, the marks of the collar long since faded. You trusted me enough to remove this. What more do you want? He didn't wait for an answer as he turned and left the room. Ochako scratches her bare calf idly as she waits to board the bus, her phone already turned off and in Aizawa-sensei's bag along with everyone else's. For a moment, she had been worried that they knew it was her, but when he had moved to Su-chan without a second glance, she had breathed an internal sigh of relief. Against her will, her eyes found their TAs across the crowd, his green eyes as unreadable as they had always been. All right, Aizawa-sensei drawls from the front of the bus. Get on and be quiet, you gremlins. She turns to walk to the bus when a cold hand comes down on her shoulder. We gotta talk later. Midoriya's voice is low, and his hand leaves her shoulder almost instantly. To onlookers, it would seem like he merely brushed past her, and she watched him engage in idle chatter with some of her classmates. Ochako swallowed thickly. As she walked off towards the bus again, she saw her teacher watch them all with hawk's eyes, and she realized with a start that they did know. Just not who. Fuck. Shoto taps Midoriya's shoulders as they get off the bus. I need to ask you something. The other teenager seems wary as he looks around the rest of the class before focusing back on him. If it's about that day at the mall... No, not about that. Shoto waves him off. Just, are you related to Principal Nezu somehow? Like a secret love child? Midoriya blinks slowly. What? Shoto waves at the other's scar. Well, I mean your scars match. Todoroki, he says with the type of voice Fuyumi uses with her students. Nezu isn't human. Shoto just shrugs. Quirks exist. Midoriya looks like he wants to argue when the car stops nearby, and they are interrupted by a loud voice. Oh my, look guys, our little kitten has returned. Shoto can't help the little flames flickering on his hair as Pixie Bob hugged him. How are you doing, sweetie? Good. He cleared his throat. trying in vain to ignore the snickers and jeers from his classmates. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Ragdoll struck a pose as she giggled at his consternation. Well, you see, UA needed a large area for you guys to train at, and we own this whole mountain range, so... Ah. It wasn't that he hadn't enjoyed his internship with them. On the contrary, he was pretty sure he'd enjoy focusing on rescue heroics after graduation, especially because it would anger Endeavor, but he just couldn't deal with their antics. At all. His eyes flicker to Kota, still sitting in their car, and he gives him a little wave. The boy merely narrows his eyes and sticks out his tongue before ducking down behind the window. I see he still loves me. Mandalay pats his head consolingly, and behind him he hears the other snicker. Don't worry, he hates us too. Her tone is teasing, but he knows she hates it. He can't exactly blame the kid, but still. They were too nice to be treated like that. He is about to say more, but suddenly Mandalay pushes him back towards his snickering classmates, and the next he knows they're sent over the cliffside by Pixie Bob. Shoto is immediately reminded of his internship and sighs as he makes an ice slide towards the ground below. Oh, joy. Ochako taps her fingers to return the gravity to the bucket full of dirty dishes, sighing as she turns around only to shriek as she runs face first into Midoriya, his eyes hard as he watches her. Can you be any more obvious? You scared me! Whatever, he mumbles, motioning her to follow him out the back door of the kitchen. Once outside, he turns to her, arms crossed. So, how did you give them your location? I don't... She stops when he holds up his mangled hand, one eyebrow raised. She averts her eyes. With a sigh, she bends down and removes the tracker from the underside of her left sneaker, holding it out to him. Ah, he says simply, taking it from her for a moment before dropping it to the ground and stomping down. What do they want with the location? Got any info on that? Shigaraki was kind of tight-lipped for a change. I really don't, she whimpers, scrubbing at her eyes nervously and feeling the tears pool at the corners. Please don't tell anyone. My parents, There was a villain attack and the insurance... Uraraka, he interrupts her, and his voice and face seem uncharacteristically gentle. I haven't revealed your identity. They know there's a traitor, but I didn't tell them who it is. Ochako is stunned for a moment, enough so that her tears stop. Why? Midoriya shrugs. Well, for one, it would have compromised us both, and I can't have that, he admits easily. But also, Uraraka, I don't make it a habit to fuck up people's lives for no reason. You needed the money, and the info you gave the League? Peanuts. It's not worth ruining your life over. But the USJ... Let me tell you a secret, he says, stepping a little closer to her. Your intel only gave us a time and place. What happened there was inevitable and not your fault, okay? And whatever they plan here isn't yours either. Without you, there would have been other ways to get to All Might and other ways to find this place. He hesitates, eyes seeming to catch on something behind her before he focuses back on her. I won't tell on you, Uraraka, and I won't presume to tell you what to do. But if you feel like you can't live with yourself, then go and tell Aizawa. I'm not stopping you. Why are you being so nice all of a sudden? He raises an eyebrow at her. I'm not nice. Just pragmatic. You're a teenager, don't burden yourself with more than you can carry. If you're going to be a hero, you will have more regrets than you can count eventually. There's no need to get a head start. You're a teenager too, she retorts, thinking she is starting to understand. Even if you had a head start, you can still slow down and take a break, I think. He looks at her for a long moment, eyebrow raised, then turns and walks away without another word. Sometimes, Izuku wonders if everyone around him was stupid on purpose or on accident. He knows Aizawa had overheard him and Uraraka long enough that he should at least suspect her as the traitor. By the time he had noticed it, it had already been too late for plausible deniability, but the man hadn't approached either of them about it. When Izuku had asked him if the test of courage was a good idea, the man had simply raised an eyebrow. Why? And risk your cover? Or is there something you would like to tell me? They had stared at each other for a moment before Aizawa sighed. There are heroes throughout the area the kids will be in, and they're in pairs. If we act too nervous, it might tip the League off. We don't even know if they will attack tonight. He looked at him. Or do we? We don't, Izuku muttered begrudgingly. He looked out at the dark forest, biting his lips. Give them emergency permissions, at least. Say it's just in case. The area is huge and hard to monitor. Look at you, all worried. Oh, can it, Eraser, he growled, glaring at the older man before he made off to the woods. Where do you think you're going? Izuku only flipped him off in lieu of a response. Maybe it should have assuaged his worries a bit. Aizawa must know that it's dangerous to have the kids spread out with their location known, but on the other hand, they didn't have a way to know the students would be spread thin throughout the forest, surrounded by heroes who knew the place in and out, and he hadn't talked against him when he brought up emergency permissions. With the current league roster, there was a good chance the students would be all right, if push came to shove. But they were just teenagers. Naive kids whose worst encounter with villains so far had been a tightly controlled farce he had concocted. There had been no variables in his plan. There rarely were. Sure, there had been Stain, but Ida had been lying on the ground like the dumbass he was, and Shinso had brainwashed the villain in a second. Would they be all right against people out to kill them? No, definitely not. Izuku had given up on playing hero a long time ago. But he also really hated unknown variables. The first thing Izuku sees when he gets to the cliffside is the kid Kirishima had approached when they had arrived at camp, against Todoroki's advice, and who had subsequently punched him in the nuts. It had been terribly amusing, if you ask him. "What do you want, broccoli?" Izuku only raises an unimpressed eyebrow at the twerp, then keeps sweeping his gaze over the visible part of the mountain and woods. "Just checking something. What about you?" "Avoiding you stupid heroes." He looks back at the kid then, mentally going over things he knew about him before it clicked. "Oh, you're water hoses kid, huh? That was shitty, my condolences or whatever." He shrugs. "If it makes you feel better, I'm not a hero or a student, so don't go and lash your grief out at me." "Then what?" "Oh, quite a few more faces here than expected." They both stiffen, turning to face the giant of a man stepping towards them. Muscular, Izuku recalls from the roster Shigaraki had given him. It's a bit of an ironic twist, he thinks, gaze darting to the orphan. "Ah, you're that spy the big boss talked about, huh? Fancy meeting you here." "You're a villain?" Izuku sighs at the brat, rubbing his temple. "So what?" "He ain't on the list, but Big Boss said if we come across you, we should make sure. You think I can kill him as a bit of a warm-up? It's been ages." Izuku can tell the kid is frustrated at being ignored, but more so he's scared out of his mind. Frankly, Izuku really wishes he wasn't anywhere near this place. "What list?" He inches slowly in front of the kid, trying to keep the other villain's focus on him. "And frankly, I'd rather you focus on the objective either way. Some of the others really aren't more than a distraction to the students if you ask me." Muscular frowns, hands twitching. "Well, we were supposed to get those 2 finalist kids from the festival, you know." He shrugs, annoyed. "Can you tell me where they are? That's what spies do, isn't it?" Izuku stopped making spur-of-the-moment decisions when he was 12, and almost followed his mom home. There was no one he could rely on in this world, and it did no good to be reckless or heroic in a world of pain and villainy. If Izuku does something, it's planned, every detail laid out, every variable accounted for, no room left for error, to the best of his ability. Then he overhears Todoroki and his father, and his mind whirs, and he finds himself giving a pep talk before he can stop himself. Then Ida goes vigilante, hunting down a serial killer for revenge, and he is racing across rooftops and risking his life. Then Anomu he helped create from a childhood friend of Katsuki's flies off with Aizawa, and he makes a split-second decision to shoot it before he realizes what he's doing. Izuku hates what this class has been doing to him, how they have made him care despite himself. Caring was a weakness he couldn't afford, not when he was going to come out on the other side of this ordeal in one piece. Izuku makes a split-second decision. Izuku hates his quirk. There's a constant sphere of cold in his chest, all his negativity manifests, a constant reminder that he is a wretched person who deserves nothing good in his life. When he activates it, the cold spreads throughout his veins like ice in his blood. All his hatred, all his sadness, all his grief, all his contempt, all of it playing on a loop in his mind, a cacophony of jeers and slurs and suicide baits, of starburst scars and lashings and, "No, please stop, I will help you, just make it stop." He teeters on the brink, and every second he leans closer and closer to the abyss, and it has stared back a long time ago. Izuku fears the day, the hour, the minute, the second that the abyss becomes him. Izuku sees yellow and feels colder than ever. The thing about murder is as follows. The first is the worst, the second slightly less so. Eventually you either grow numb or feel your spirit break into 1,000 pieces, never to be mended. Izuku chose numbness, but something broke regardless. Izuku had never murdered to protect. Izuku had never murdered to protect. Izuku heaves a deep breath, blinking blood from his eyes. There's a squelching sound as he removes his right foot from Muscular's caved-in skull, and another him would have felt sick. As it is, he merely feels slightly dizzy. He had blanked out towards the end there. Not the first time, but the first time it had lasted so long. He vaguely remembers the blonde having been happy at the challenge and telling him that he'd think of him when he'd kill the brat, and then there was static. Blue fire erupts to his right, deep in the forest, and he comes fully back to himself. Izuku turns around to the shaking child, and a more sensitive him might have tried to wipe the blood from his hands as he reached for him, ignoring his struggles. "Let's get you back to camp, kid," he says, voice monotone, and the kid finally stops struggling. "I bet your aunt is worried sick right now." Things are a blur to Shota that night. There are villains and screams, poison gas, blue fire, and clones. There is Midoriya Izuku, covered in blood and bits of flesh, carrying a shaking Koda on his back, pushing him in his hands and then glowing with his terrible quirk as he makes his way back into the woods. "Hiro-san," Koda whimpers as he makes his way to the cottage. Why did he save me from another villain?" Shota wasn't sure he had an answer to that, at the very least not one meant for children's ears. Once the flames are doused and losses accounted for, Shota sees the usually collected villain or not walk over to a tree at the edge of the clearing and kick it clean in two, and Shota isn't entirely sure he used his quirk for that feat. Amidst the general chaos of the cleanup, Uraraka comes towards him, tears in her eyes, and asking for forgiveness. Shota looks at her bruised face and bandaged wounds and makes the executive decision to sweep her involvement under the rug. Parents are informed. The Bakugos are in tears. Endeavor needs a new office. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 9 of The Other Side of Things. Just 2 more chapters to go for this fic. Eager to hear your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.